Although invoicing should be one of the most fun parts in business because we are literally getting paid, it's actually something more tedious that we don't like to do in regards to creating them, let alone chasing them. So in this build today, we are going to create an automation within n8n just by using something as simple as Google Sheets, as you can see here, where we can create beautiful invoices just by literally clicking one button, and then also completely automating the tracking of those invoices and sending out reminders. So let's say that we have a table like this one, which contains all the basic information that we would need to create such an invoice, right? And let's take this entry right here as an example for Max Coleman. This is just some sample data that I use. And besides all that information, we also have a status column, right? And we are only going to use this specific column to basically take care of the administration part. And the second thing is that we will take a look into the inbox, and let's pretend that this is Max Coleman's inbox right now. And the one thing that I'm going to do is to switch the status from this specific entry from draft to ready. And what this switch will do is that it will trigger an automation in the background run by n8n, and this will take care of everything that comes after this. And you just saw that it just switched from ready to pending, and it added the date right here, right? And in addition to this, we also got an email, or Max Coleman rather got an email, and this is the email he just got. So this was literally a couple of seconds ago. And this just contains this one sentence right here, but it is using Max Coleman's name. Hi, Max Coleman, please find the invoice, next invoice attached. I'm going to open this up. This is a PDF file, and now you can see that this is populated with all that data that we have within our table, right? Especially in regards to the name and everything that should be customized, and it adheres to the branding of ourselves, right? And so let's try to build this within n8n together. I'm going to switch into my workflow right here. And by the way, you will get all the assets. So I'm going to share this sample table right here, and obviously also the n8n flow within my community. You will find the link in the description, and I'm going to share all the assets for free, by the way. So the first thing that we are going to do is to add a trigger, right? And the trigger that we are going to use right here is the Google Sheets trigger. And the one that I chose will be on row added or updated, so that every time we are going to change something within this table, this flow will be triggered, right? And you can obviously adjust this to your liking. Now, within n8n, we have a couple of settings. So this is connected to my Google Sheets account. The poll time, or the poll hour, I have set the poll times to every minute, and then I'm going to choose the invoice tracking demo. So this is the table right here, and the sheet is the tracking sheet, right? Everything else can stay as is. And the next one is that I want to check whether the status that we have is actually ready, right? And you can just use a simple if node for this. So I have added an if node, and I'm going to run this flow for a second so that we have some input we can work with. I'm going to save this first of all. I'm going to trigger this. And now you can see that I did get 15 items, right? And I'm going to open up this very node. And now you can see that this is all the data which is coming from my Google Sheet, right? And I can go on working with this data. Now, what I want to do is to use this input from the previous Google Sheets node within my if node. And I'm going to drag and drop this into this conditions field right here, and we are going to check whether the status is equal to, so this is a string we are working with, so you can see that this is a string condition, and what I want to check on is whether the status is or has the value of ready, right? And if that's the case, then I'm going to close this node again. Then you can see that it's going to take the true path, otherwise it's going to take the false path, right? I'm going to save this and run the flow again. And now you can see that we literally don't have any of these statuses set to ready, right? Because we have just changed this from ready to pending, or rather the automation in the background changed this, right? So if I do have one of those statuses that are set to ready, I'm going to change this one again, and I'm going to run this flow again. Then now you can see that there is one item, and this is exactly this item right here, which has been triggered by the automation. Other than that, all of the other ones are false, or the 14 items are false. All right, so now we can go on with this very path. All right, so we do have one item. So let's go on by getting the template and the template of the actual invoice. So how does this work? As you can see, I have opened up this folder right here on my Google Drive, and you can see that I've already tested this a couple of times. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I do have an invoice template right here, right? And if you look into the doc itself, then this is the very template that we already saw in the output, right? The only difference is, and by the way, this gives me the flexibility and freedom to change this to my brand, right? So the only thing that I need to take care of is that I'm going to use this template, and I'm going to put placeholders in this very template right here. Because what this does is that we will be able to use this template and then later on just replace these very parameters right here with the according value of our table, right? We will just use a simple search and replace method, right? So we need to take care, or we need to make sure that the variable that we have right here will not be something that is ambiguous, right? So it has to be an ID, if you will. And but that's also all there is, right? So we are going to prepare the whole document with the actual variables that we want to use later on. So the only thing that I changed right here or right now is the blue field right here. Obviously, you would also change this one to the according variable, something like, client address or something. So client address, and then you would basically populate or replace all the sample data within here with according placeholders that we can later on use, right? I'm going to keep it like this for now. And if I jump back into n8n, then now what I want to do is to pull this very document as the template and then create a copy of this, right? So when I click on this button right here and I'm going to look for Google Drive, then I'm going to jump into the Google Drive node itself. And here you can already see that at the very top we have copy file, and this is exactly what we want, right? I'm going to click on this one. And now I'm being confronted with the settings of the specific node. I have connected this to my specific Google Drive account. Obviously, the resource will be a file. The operation will be copy. Now, which file do I want to copy? Exactly this one, right? So if I jump into my Google Drive folder, then you can see that this is the template that I want to use, that I want to make a copy of, right? And by the way, obviously, the reason why we are not changing or updating the template itself is because we want to use it, right? And the future flows already, right? So if we would change it in the actual template, this wouldn't make sense because we want to use it later on again. Within this specific node, I am going to select this very template. So when I look for invoice, then you can see that this is the invoice template demo, and this is already it. Now the file name of the copy would make sense to use something like invoice. We're going to write this hard coded, and then we can just use the customer name, for instance, something like this, right? And then it already will be shown down here that the file itself will be named such as this, right? You could also add something like the invoice number if you're comfortable with this. Then you can obviously create a very dynamic and semantically correct naming convention, right? So we are going to keep it as this. And what I want to do is to already test this, right? So I'm going back into my Google Sheet. I'm going to set this one again to ready, and I'm going to start the flow. And now we can see that it is copying the file. And when I jump back into my invoice manager, and remember, we chose this one right here, so Julia Fisher, right? And I'm going to this one into my Google Drive again. Then now you can see that this was just created down here, right? So invoice Julia Fisher, and then we have the invoice ID in the name itself, right? All right, so now we can work with this document right here. So the next step that we want to do is that we want to update the fields right now within that specific document, right? The way we're going to do this is just by looking for the Google Docs node. And what we want to do, and you can see there aren't as many actions, we will use update a document, and the settings are as follows. So this is obviously, again, connected to my Google Docs account. Then the resource will be a document, the operation will be update. And now we do obviously need the ID of this specific file, right? So of this specific file that we have just created, right? Of that copy file. Where do we get this? That's actually quite easy because the previous node copy file will also provide us with the ID of that new file, right? So this is something that we can already use dynamically. So I'm going to just pull this in right here, and this will already give us the ID of that newly created file. Now down here, you can see the actions that we can conduct. And what we want to do is that we want to replace text, right? If you remember, these are the variables, right? And if we take a look into the newly created document right here, then this still looks exactly as we have the template, right? As we have prepared the template. So within this node now, we want to use the action of find and replace text, right? And now the old text will be the client name, for instance. So we are going to use this specific naming conventions, if you will, because this exactly matches what we have right here, right? So we will use this specific parameter that we want to search for. And then what are we going to replace it with? In this case, we want to have the name, and we will get the name. If I collapse this again, then you can see that these are all the previous nodes we have before, right? And the very first node from the Google Sheets trigger will also give us the customer name, right? And this is the variable that we want to use as the new text. So it will look for this variable right here, and it will replace it with the actual name of the client. And obviously, we will continue doing this with the client address, with the phone number, with all the amounts, right? Obviously, with the invoice ID and so on and so forth. But I believe that the principle or the concept itself should be clear. All right, that's already it. We're just going to replace the name. I'm going to close this node, save it, And I'm just going to execute the very last step. So this was successful, and we're going to jump into the invoice of Julia Fisher again. And now you can see that it has just been replaced with the actual client name, right? Perfect. So this is working. Next note will now be that we want to pull this file, this specific file, into our flow and then basically attach it to the actual email, right? So that it's a little more convenient for the client to take a look at it, right? And the way we're going to do this is that we will use the Google Drive node again. And there we have download a file. If we're looking for download, then this is the node and this is the action that we want to use. Now, which file do we want to download? Again, this is connected to my Google Drive account. The resource will be file, operation will be download. Now, which file do I want to download? Obviously, in this case, I don't want to manually select it because I want to keep it dynamic, right? So every time the flow runs, it takes the newly created document, in this case from Julia Fisher, right? So we are not going to choose from list, but actually we are going to choose the ID again, right? And we remember that we have the document ID already within our previous notes, right? So we will know exactly which document we can use. And again, we have the ID right here so that we can download the specific file. All right, so let's execute this very step as well. I'm going to close this note for a second just to have a look. So we have tested the flow until here already, as you can see here, right? So the very last arrow as within this flow, as you can see, is green, and we have one item. So I'm just going to execute this very step. And now this was also successful, and it gave us one item. And if we take a look into this, then now you can actually see that it gave us a binary file, right? So this is the data that we have received, that we have just actually downloaded. And here we can already see which file we just got. And this is the exact file that we wanted to have, right? The invoice of or for Julia Fisher. And now with this file, we can already start to send our email, right? So what we want to do is to look for, in this case, Gmail. And what we want to do is to send a message. I'm going to choose this very action. This is again connected to my Gmail account. Resource will be a message and the operation will be sent, right? Now, where do we want to send it to? And I'm going to switch to the schema view again so that we can have a better look in regards to the inputs into the previous notes and what they gave us. And the email address that I want to use will already come from this specific invoice tracking table, right? If you remember, we have all the data right in here, and this is exactly what I'm going to use. So I have the data right here, including the email address. So where should it be sent to? It should be sent in this case to Julia Fisher, right? And that's already it in that regard. Now, in regards to the subject, we can use something like invoice, and then we can already combine this again, right? So something like you have a new invoice, and then I don't know, maybe for references so that the client already knows or has a better organized subject line so that he already knows which invoice this is going to contain. Now, the email type can be HTML, or you can just use a regular text, right? In this case, I'm just going to say hi. And again, we have seen this in the demo, that we can use the full customer name. If you want to keep it a little more personalized, you can also, have like a second column where you are splitting first and last name, right? So that you would just say hi Julia instead of hi Julia Fisher, right? But this is already obviously up to you how you want to do this. Hi Julia Fisher, please find the next invoice attached. Thanks. And that's already it. Now, what we want to do, obviously, is to add the file that we have as an attachment, right? And what we need to do for this is that we will need to open up the very drop down at the bottom right here. And there you can see that we have the option to add attachments, right? Now, how do we add this attachment? We will just click on add attachment. And here you can see that we have a default value from n8n, right? Which was populated by n8n already, which has the file, or the field name rather, called data. Right? And if we take a look into our previous note, which was to download a file, and we will take a look at the binary view, and you can see that this is also called data, right? So by default, this very note, the download a file note from Google Drive, will output a file called data with the field name data, right? And this note right here, the send a message note, will contain a field name with the name data as well. So this matches, and we can be sure that this is exactly the data and the file that we want to attach to it, right? If you want to change this, you can do this as well, but be aware that you would also need to change it within the previous node, right? And we are just going to keep it as simple as this one. And that's already it. So I'm going to close this note. And one thing I forgot is that we can obviously send a doc, right? A docx file to, in this case, our customer Julia Fisher. But what we can also do, which would be a little more convenient and professional probably, is to convert this document into a PDF, right? Just as we have seen in our demo, right? So we're going to jump back into our example right here, what we have with Max Coleman. Then you can see that this is actually a PDF, right? So they can't edit this specific file. And this is what I also want to do. Now, the way I do this is that within the download a file file node, I'm going to open this up, and here you can see that we also have some options, and one of those options is Google File Conversion, right? And when I open this up, then you can see that we get this button right here. I'm going to click this Add Conversion, and what this does is that it will take the incoming data, whether it is a Google Doc or a Google Drawing or a Google Slide or a Google Sheet, and convert it into this specific file type that we select right here, right? So if there's an incoming Google Doc, then we will convert it into a PDF. If there was a Google Drawing or a Google Slide, we could also convert it into something else, right? But in this case, we do have a an incoming Google Doc, right? So this is what we want to convert it to. So I'm going to select PDF, and that's already it. So if I execute this step right here, and before I click this, take a look at the file extension we got previously, right? Which was docx. And when I execute this step right here, then now you can see we do get the same file back, right? But this time the file extension is a PDF, right? Perfect. So this is exactly what we wanted. I'm going to close this again, and I'm going to save the whole flow. And I'm going to click on the send message again. And just to make sure, this is still called data, and this is also called data. So this will be attached to that specific email. I'm going to close this one, and that's almost it. And the only thing that I'm going to do, and which you should definitely add, is to update the actual sheet right here, right? Because we want to switch from the status ready into pending, right? Because this would make much sense. Now, what I want to do here is that I want to add a Google Sheets node. I'm going to use the update a row in a sheet action again. I'm going to choose this one. And again, this is still connected to my Google Sheets. Resource is a sheet. Operation will be to update a row. Now I'm going to manually select the file that we have before, invoice tracking demo. Also, the sheet will still be the same tracking. And now it opens up this mapping column mode, and I'm going to choose manually. And the column I want to match it to will be the invoice number, right? Because this is an ID, right? There are no ambiguous results. So I wouldn't take the customer name or the invoice date or anything else, but I'm going to use the invoice number because this is, there's only one result for this one. So again, the column I want to match on will be the invoice number. Where would this invoice number come from? From all the inputs that I have, it would come from the very first Google Sheets trigger. And here you can see that I'm going to just drag and drop this right in here, and this will give me the invoice number so that the system will know, and it will know which row should actually be updated. Now, what do we want to do? I now have access to all the columns that I have within this Google Sheet. The first thing that I want to do is that I want to give the status the value of pending, right? Because after the email has been sent, right, we can be sure that, or we should be sure that the email will arrive at the client's inbox, and then we can set it to pending from ready, right? This was the status before. And what we can also do is that we are going to set the sent date so that we have within our table right here the exact time and date when we have sent the invoice to the client. And what we're going to do to keep it dynamically as well is that we are going to use an expression for this called now, which will give us the moment basically of the current moment, or the current date and time. But let's say for our purposes, we want to reformat into something as simple as this one so that we only get the date, but obviously you can also add the time just to your liking. All right, so this is already it, and this is everything that we want to have changed, right? I'm going to delete this for a second because this was still from the previous run. And we still have the status of ready, and there will by default be no send date because we haven't sent anything, obviously. And that's already it for this node. So I'm going to close this right here. And now I want to test this, so I'm going to open this up, and the to address will already be the sample address that we have right here. So for the time being, I'm going to replace this with my actual email address, and then I'm going to send this to myself. All right, I have just changed this, and now I'm going to execute this very step, and I'm going to jump back into my inbox. So this is the one we had before, and I'm going to execute this, just the sending message step. Now this was successful. I'm going to jump back into my inbox. Now you can see that we did receive a message. I'm going to open this up again, and you can see this has just been sent, and this is the subject, right? We have decided to include the invoice ID into the subject line, and this is the text that I entered, and this is the actual attachment. And if I open this up, then you can see that this is the very document, right, where we have changed the client name. All right, so this worked perfectly, and that's actually already it. Now, just as for the last step, I'm going to also execute this step. I'm going to back into the table, and we still have the ready status, and the sent date field is still empty. And I'm going to execute this very last step. There is one item successfully, and I'm going to jump back into the table, and now you can see that the Julia Fisher entry has changed the status from ready to pending, and we have the current date as the sent date. All right, fantastic. So this has worked very well. I'm going to tidy this up a little. So this is the flow that we now have. Now what we are going to do next is that we want to add another flow, right, which will take care of the tracking, right, which will basically follow a similar logic. So what we want to do first, and I'm going to put this in the same flow right here. Obviously, you can create another flow for this just for us to have a little perspective how they are both related. What I'm going to do is to look for another trigger, because we already have the Google Sheets trigger right here, but you can add another trigger. And the one that we're going to use will be on a schedule. And this can, for instance, run every day, right? So every day at a certain time, this will run, and it will basically check, or the flow after this will basically check if the sent date that we have conducted right here, or that we have populated right here, will be older than 15 or 14 days, right? If obviously the due date of your specific contract says 7 days, then obviously we would change this to 7 days, right? So according to your specific use case. What I'm going to do is to first of all pull all the information from the Google Sheets again. So I'm going to look for this Google Sheets node, and I want to get the rows from a sheet, and obviously this sheet will again be our tracking sheet. So I'm going to select the invoice tracking demo and the sheet tracking. Again, this is connected to my Google Sheets account. Resource will be a sheet. The operation will be to get rows, and then I'm just going to manually select this very file right here, and the sheet will just be this sheet right here because there's only one. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do this. So I'm going to add a filter, and I'm going to filter for all the statuses that have the value of pending, right? Because everything else in that regard will not make sense to send a reminder based on this, right? Because if the status is just ready, right, or again is already something like draft, right, or paid, let alone, we don't want to obviously send out a reminder, right? So I'm just going to pull in all the rows that are pending. I'm going to execute this step, and let's just see what happens. And this is exactly what I got. So I do have 6 items. I received 6 items, and when I count this, then these are exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items that have the status of pending. I'm going to back into n8n. I'm going to close this one, save the flow. All right, now the next step, as I've mentioned, is that we want to check whether this sent date of those pending entries is older than 14 days, right? Now, and as you can see, so today is November 13. All of these are not within that condition, right? So these are all from today, and these are from yesterday, but we're going to change this in a second. So the first thing that I want to do is to add another if node, and this time what I want to do is to use an expression to check on that, right? And this is quite simple actually, because the only thing that I want to do is to use an expression for now, and I want to use the current date and time, right? And what I want to do is to check if there is a difference to another day and time, right? And the other day and time that I want to use in this case will be this specific one that we have within our sent date column, right? And I'm going to drag and drop this right here, right in between those parentheses. And now you can see that I do get a result, right? And this is the difference between the current date and time and the date and time that we have right here in this column. The condition that we want to check on will not be if it is equal to, or rather it is if it, first of all, is a number, and then if it is greater than, and greater than what? And as I've mentioned, I'm going to use 14 days, right? You can use whatever you prefer, but this will basically check if there is a difference between the current time and the sent time, and if this is greater than whatever number you put in here. All right, so let's test this already. And remember, we do have 6 items right here, and I'm going to execute this step. And now you can see that in the output, we now have we have 2 branches, right? The true branch and the false branch. So the true branch obviously means that they do meet this condition, and the false branch, and now you can see that we have all 6 items right here that do not match this condition, right? And this is correct because none of the entries that we have within our pending column do match the condition that it is older than 14 days. All right, so let's change this. So I'm going to change this to, let's say, last month right here. And this is Lisa Walker. And I'm going to execute this very step again. Or rather, I'm going to close this and I'm going to execute the whole flow on this path again so that we can pull the new data in. Going to execute the flow right here. And now you can see that we still get 6 items because there are still 6 items in pending, but the result is different. And you can see already here that we have 1 item which does match the condition and only 5 which do not. And I'm going to open this node here. And now you can see that we have this true branch right here, which contains 1 item, and the name of the customer is indeed Lisa Walker. And then we have the false branch, which are all the other 5. Perfect. So this worked very well. I'm going to close this again. And now the rest of the flow is actually self-explanatory. So if the date is overdue, or the invoice, rather the payment is overdue, then we can use another Gmail node and send out a reminder. I'm going to send a message again. And here we have the same logic as we have before, right? So in the to field, we would get the email address from the specific customer. Subject can now be, like first reminder, invoice, whatever, right? And then obviously within the message, you can change this to text and then hi again, and then the customer name. And then this is a reminder or something like this, right? Doesn't matter. But you do get the gist and you do get the logic, I hope. So we do have another message, right? This is connected to my Gmail account. Resource is a message, operation will be sent. And then again, we have all this previous data. And that's already it for sending the reminder itself. And then obviously as a very last step, we do need again the Google Sheets node, and we want to update another row this time. And again, this is connected to my Google Sheets account. Resource is a sheet, operation is update. The document will again be my invoice tracking demo. The sheet will again be tracking. And now we need another column to match this on. We used the invoice number this time because we do get out of the get rows node. We also get the row number. We could also use the row number, which is at the very bottom right here. So you could choose row number right here. And then the column to match this on, or the value rather, would be coming from the actual row number right here, so that the system n8n knows which column or which row rather should be updated. But as I've mentioned before, you can also use the invoice number, which also would make sense because it's an ID as well. All right, and what do we want to do? We would want to populate all the remaining data, right? So a reminder date, and the status is also, or would also be, or need to be changed from pending to overdue. So back into n8n, and I'm going to scroll down to the status. So this would be overdue. We can just write it hard-coded into that column. And then the reminder date again would also be an expression, and we would use the now node, and we can also format this to something more readable like this one. All right, I'm going to close this one again, save it, and let's just execute this very node again. Obviously, I don't want to send this again to this sample data, so I'm going to enter my email address again. Okay, I've changed this. I'm going back into my inbox just to check. So we have those two emails, right? And I'm going to execute this very node. So the reminder message has been executed successfully. I'm going back into my inbox, and here you can see that we have the data that we just entered. Hi again, Lisa Walker. This is a reminder. Back into n8n, and I'm going to execute the very last node before I'm going back into the table again. And remember, we had Lisa Walker, and her status is pending, and there's no reminder date yet. Going back into n8n, execute this step. This was successfully as well. Back into the table, and now you can see that the status has changed to overdue, and we have the reminder date, right, when we have sent that reminder. All right, and that's already it. So if this was helpful to you, then I would highly appreciate if you let me know via the comments what kinds of topics you are interested in, so that I can cover them on this channel. And I highly appreciate every like and every share as well. And I'm going to share all the assets within my school community. You will find the link in the description. I highly appreciate your attention and hope to see you next time. Bye.